The scent of roasted garlic and rosemary drifted through the ballroom, weaving itself between the soft notes of the string quartet. I stood near the catering station, clipboard in hand, watching as servers in crisp black uniforms carried trays of my creations across the glittering floor. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, dresses shimmered in gold and navy, and the guests' laughter rose and fell like waves. Every bite they took, every compliment whispered behind manicured hands, was a silent victory I never thought I'd taste. But victories don't erase scars. Not entirely. I adjusted the cuff of my silk blouse, the one I'd splurged on after signing my biggest contract yet. Its smooth fabric grounded me as my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced down at the screen. A name flashed across it. A name I hadn't seen in years. My breath caught, and suddenly the ballroom felt smaller, suffocating, like the walls were inching closer. How ironic, I thought, my lips curving into the faintest smile. The same people who once pushed away my food, untouched, now wanted me to feed their entire guest list. They hadn't recognized me yet. Not the girl with trembling hands, not the woman who carried rejection like a second skin. To them, I was just the caterer, the help. But soon they would know. They would know exactly whose food they were praising, whose flavors melted on their tongues. And they would remember the night they refused to take even a single bite. Tonight was their event. But this time the menu was mine. I wasn't always this composed, standing in designer heels beneath chandeliers. Once, I was just Emily Carter, the girl with flour on her cheeks and a dream too fragile for anyone to take seriously. Back then, I lived in a cramped two-bedroom house in Ohio with my parents and younger brother, Michael. My sanctuary was the kitchen. The clatter of pots, the hiss of onions hitting hot oil, the steady rhythm of my knife against the cutting board, those were the sounds that steadied me. I believed food was love, that it could connect people, heal people. I still remember the first time I invited my family to sit down and taste the dishes I'd been practicing for weeks. I'd saved for ingredients for my part-time grocery store job, fresh basil, real Parmesan, and a bottle of olive oil that felt like liquid gold. I set the table with mismatched plates, smoothed the wrinkles out of the faded tablecloth, and lit 2 stubby candles to make it feel special. Homemade pasta, I announced, nervous excitement bubbling in my chest. My mother poked at the plate. My father sniffed, unimpressed. And Michael, smirking, muttered, "Tastes like soggy school lunch." The laughter that followed stung worse than any burn from the stove. My throat tightened, my eyes burned, but I forced myself to smile, even as my hands shook clearing away untouched plates. My food, my heart, had been rejected in one cruel, careless moment. That night, I sat outside on the porch steps, the summer air thick and heavy. My grandmother, who lived 2 houses down, came over. She was the only one who had stayed quiet during the mockery, her sharp blue eyes watching everything. She lowered herself beside me, placing a worn, leather-bound recipe book into my lap. "This," she said softly, "is your inheritance. These are the recipes my mother carried from New Orleans. When people don't taste your food, child, it's not because your food isn't good. It's because they don't yet know hunger for what you have to offer." I traced my fingers over the faded ink, the pages stained with oil and time. Something shifted in me then. If my own family wouldn't eat my food, then fine. I'd cook for the world instead. That night, under a blanket of fireflies, I made a decision. I would not stop. I would not give up. I would turn their rejection into fuel, and someday, they would know exactly what they had turned away. Leaving home wasn't easy, but staying would have been harder. I packed a single suitcase, the recipe book my grandmother gave me, and a box of kitchen tools I'd collected from thrift shops. At 19, I boarded a bus bound for Chicago, my chest tight with fear but my heart pounding with determination. The city swallowed me whole at first, skyscrapers rising like steel giants, subways screeching below my feet, crowds rushing with a pace I couldn't match. I rented a tiny basement studio that smelled faintly of mildew, where the window barely let in sunlight. But in that dim room, with a single hot plate and secondhand pots, I began building the life no one believed I could. I worked double shifts at a cafe, scrubbing tables, and learning the rhythm of service. I watched the cooks, memorizing how they moved, how they seasoned without measuring. On nights when my feet ached so badly I thought they'd give out, I still experimented, cooking for myself, writing notes in the margins of Grandma's recipe book. There were nights I cried into my apron, doubting myself. I burned dishes, wasted money I didn't have on failed experiments, and heard the echo of my brother's cruel words, "Tastes like soggy school lunch." But then I'd remember my grandmother's voice. "They don't yet know hunger for what you have to offer." My break came unexpectedly. Mrs. Ramirez, a customer at the cafe, noticed me scribbling recipes during my break. She asked what I was working on, and when I shyly explained, she insisted I cook for her church event. 50 people, she said with a smile. "You'll do fine." I was terrified. But I cooked pots of jambalaya, trays of cornbread, bowls of gumbo that simmered for hours until the air was thick with spice and smoke. When the guests took their first bites, silence fell, followed by the kind of sighs that only good food can pull out of people. Applause came after, and with it, my very first paycheck with my name on it. That small event lit a spark. Word spread. Soon I was cooking for baby showers, office parties, block festivals. I juggled jobs, slept less, but every compliment fueled me. I registered a small business, Carter's Kitchen. My logo was simple, but it meant the world. It meant I was real. A retired chef named Daniel, who had once run a well-known Chicago bistro, became my mentor after tasting my food at a charity event. He didn't just teach me technique. He taught me discipline. Consistency wins more than talent. He'd remind me as I chopped onions until my eyes blurred. His belief in me patched wounds I didn't realize were still open. Within 3 years, I'd saved enough to rent a modest commercial kitchen. By year 5, Carter's Kitchen had grown into a respected catering service with employees, contracts, and clients who trusted me with their most important days. Yet, when family called, I never told them the truth. "How are you, Emily?" my mother would ask on rare occasions. "Oh, I'm fine. Just working," I'd reply, vague and careful. I didn't post photos of events on social media. I downplayed my success. Because part of me wasn't ready, not yet, to let them see what I'd built. But I promised myself, the day they finally did, it would be unforgettable. The ballroom glowed under chandeliers, the kind that seemed to drip with light. My staff moved like a well-rehearsed symphony, servers gliding between tables, chefs working swiftly behind the scenes. Every plate, every garnish was my signature. It was a wedding. The kind where roses climbed the walls, the tablecloths shimmered ivory, and a string quartet hummed in the corner. I should have been focused solely on service, but my eyes kept drifting toward the head table. That's where I saw them. My parents. My brother Michael. Sitting there, laughing, raising glasses of champagne. The breath caught in my throat. I hadn't seen them in almost a decade, not since the night of the soggy school lunch, insult that had sent me spiraling toward this very path. And now, here they were, guests of honor at the very event Carter's Kitchen had been hired to cater. I watched as plates of my signature short rib ravioli were placed before them. I knew that dish like I knew my own heartbeat, the tenderness of the meat, the richness of the sauce, the way the Parmesan crisp broke with the perfect snap. I knew their faces, too, as the first bite touched their lips. My father's brow furrowed in concentration. My mother's eyes widened just slightly. Michael let out a low whistle. They didn't know yet. They didn't know who had crafted the food they were praising. And I wasn't ready to tell them. Not immediately. Suspense, I thought, is a dish best served hot. The bride's father, a corporate client I'd catered for before, made his way toward me during dessert. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Emily," he boomed, "you've outdone yourself again." Best decision we made was hiring Carter's Kitchen. Heads turned, including theirs. I felt the weight of my family's gaze lock onto me. For a heartbeat, I was 19 again, trembling over untouched plates. But then, like muscle memory, my chin lifted, my shoulders straightened, and I smiled. Michael's voice sliced across the chatter. "Wait. Emily, Emily? The table fell silent. My parents stared, first in disbelief, then in dawning recognition. Yes, I said calmly, stepping closer. My heels clicked against marble as if punctuating every word. I'm Emily Carter, owner and executive chef of Carter's Kitchen. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, before my mother found her voice. You own this? All of this? She gestured at the grand displays, the uniformed staff, the endless trays of food being devoured. I do, I answered. And tonight, you're my guests. Their reactions tumbled out in waves. My father, stiff and prideful, muttered something about surprising. My mother's cheeks flushed as she fumbled for words. Michael stared like he'd seen a ghost. Around us, guests continued eating, laughing, clinking glasses, oblivious to the storm gathering in one corner of the ballroom. I let them sit in their silence for a moment longer. Then I leaned in, voice low but steady. Do you remember that night in our kitchen? When I begged you to taste my food, and you refused? When you laughed? No one spoke, but their faces said enough. Well, I continued, standing tall. You refused then. But now? Now you pay me to serve it. The truth hung in the air, undeniable. I saw it then. The flicker of guilt in my mother's eyes, the tightness in my father's jaw, the way Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. And beneath it all, amazement. They hadn't believed in me. They hadn't even tried. Yet here I was, not just surviving, but thriving. The girl they once dismissed was gone. In her place stood a woman who owned the very stage they were standing on. And for the first time in my life, I felt no need for their approval. They asked to speak with me privately after dinner, away from the buzz of music and chatter. I led them into one of the smaller side rooms, a quiet space lined with mirrors and dim lighting meant for bridal touch-ups. It felt like the perfect stage for this conversation. My father cleared his throat first. Emily, we didn't realize, we didn't know you'd built something like this. The words were stiff, grudging, like they'd been dragged out of him. My mother wrung her hands, her eyes darting from me to the polished floor. Michael, arms crossed, leaned against the wall, trying to mask his discomfort. I let the silence stretch before answering. No. You didn't know. Because you never asked. My voice was calm, but it carried weight. Years of hurt pressed into each syllable. When I tried to share my passion, you dismissed me. Do you have any idea what it felt like to pour my heart onto a plate, only for my own family to laugh? Michael shifted, his gaze falling. My mother whispered, we were wrong. I exhaled slowly, feeling the power shift settle into place. For so long, I had been the one desperate for scraps of approval. But tonight, they were the ones searching for my forgiveness. I've fed thousands of people, I continued. I've built a business from nothing. I've earned respect that you never thought I deserved. And now you want to sit here and pretend it doesn't sting? No. That's not how this works. I could see them bracing for rejection, maybe even punishment. But I wasn't here to humiliate them. I was here to set terms, my terms. If you want to be part of my life, here are the conditions, I said, steady and unflinching. First, respect. Not just for me, but for anyone chasing a dream. No more mocking, no more belittling. Words leave scars, and I won't allow that anymore. Second, honesty. Don't pretend pride you never showed when it mattered. If you're proud of me now, let it be because you've grown, not because I finally became someone worth showing off. And third, I paused, meeting Michael's eyes. Support. Real support. Not money, not empty praise. Effort. Show up. Be present. If you want a seat at my table, you'll have to earn it, the same way I did. The room was thick with silence. My father's jaw clenched, my mother's eyes filled, and Michael nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. I'm not cruel, I added softly. I don't hate you. But I refuse to go back to being the girl whose food you wouldn't eat. That chapter is closed. If you want to be in this one, you'll play by my rules. For the first time in years, I wasn't begging for love. I was offering a choice. The ball was in their court now. The weeks that followed the wedding surprised me. For once, my phone buzzed not with client orders, but with messages from my own family. At first, I ignored them, wary of old wounds reopening. But slowly, I allowed myself to listen. Michael was the first to act. He showed up at one of my community events, a food drive Carter's Kitchen sponsored every year. He didn't announce himself, didn't expect recognition. He just rolled up his sleeves and helped pack boxes. When our eyes met across the room, he gave me a small nod. Not an apology in words, but an apology in action. It meant more than anything he could have said. My mother came next. She invited me to her home, nervous and fumbling, a plate of store-bought cookies on the table like some sort of peace offering. For the first time, she asked, not told, but asked, how I learned to balance flavors, how I built my business, how I kept going when no one believed. Her questions carried something unfamiliar: humility. Even my father, stubborn as stone, began to change. He didn't gush, didn't praise me in grand gestures. But once, as he left my restaurant after dinner, he paused at the door and said, "Your grandmother would have been proud." It was the closest thing to a confession I'd ever heard from him. And somehow it was enough. One evening, after a long day in the kitchen, I sat in my office with the leather-bound recipe book open on my desk. The pages were stained and fragile now, but the words still carried the strength of generations before me. My grandmother's handwriting curled across the margins. When they don't taste your food, it's not because it isn't good. It's because they don't yet know hunger for what you have to offer. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't from pain. They were from gratitude, for the struggle, for the rejection, for the journey that had carved me into the woman I'd become. I closed the book gently, letting my fingers linger on its worn cover. "They refused to eat my food once," I whispered into the quiet. "Now, I choose who gets a seat at my table." And with that, I smiled. Not out of bitterness. Out of freedom.